Welcome to another edition of the AI Files. As you can see, again, I'm here. Shadab is on a well-rested vacation right now. I'm sure he'll be back on our next episode. But for today, I will be taking you through a couple of interesting news articles and things that happened over the last week as it relates to AI. Just to give you a little teaser on those things, we have Jamie Dimon talking about potentially a 3.5-day work week. That would be very interesting. That would be welcome. But there are a lot of other news articles as well, or things that actually hit in the news. Everything from OpenAI and their ad business hitting an interesting milestone to a recent report from Anthropic talking about AI skills gap hitting everybody in terms of what is actually there as far as inequality risks and what that might mean to the job market. We also have, I'm sure everyone's probably heard by now, but OpenAI shut down Sora. So what does that actually mean and the real reasons behind that? We have a couple of interesting news from Google, everything from Google opening up Gemma 4 to VO 3.1. As well as an AI entry from Google called TurboQuant. We'll also get into the release of GPT or ChatGPT into your car. So if you have Apple Play, we'll get into that as well. And last but not least, there are some multimodal capabilities inside of Microsoft's research agent. So we'll get through all those and more today on the AI Files. Stay tuned.
Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. You're looking to stay up to date on the AI. This is the podcast for you. I'm Shadab Hussain. I'm the director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co-host.
Hello, everybody. Jamie Basilico, as you know already. I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect. And as a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel. So the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft. Okay, so I talked about the, at least in the teaser, the quote from one of the prominent folks in business talking about a 3.5-day work week. So this is actually from Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He believes that in 30 years from now, I think it might be a little bit sooner than that, but our kids might be working just 3.5 days a week because of AI. So the context here is much bigger than just a flashy quote unquote line. This actually came from an interview that Jamie did with a CBS News crew with Tony Dokopil, where he framed how he thinks about AI is going to change the labor force. And, in this case, it was very optimistic. Shorter work weeks, potentially leading to longer lives, better material, safer transportation, and even, medical advances coming from that. But in the same conversation, he also warned of how AI could disrupt the labor market if adoption moves too fast by companies. And he argued that businesses and governments alike need to be ready to retrain their workers. And again, this is important because I look at this as we always see the pundits in Silicon Valley, whether or not it's somebody from OpenAI or Anthropic, and I will be talking about a jobs report a little bit later on. But, this is coming from a person not in Silicon Valley. This is, again, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, and he's talking about it from the standpoint of economic and societal shifts, and not just about software upgrades or what's the next thing that could sell. So it really, at least his viewpoint puts a little bit different, I don't want to call it credibility, but it puts a little bit of a differentiation in terms of weighting, because it reflects how AI, at least from his point of view, is being discussed by leaders who think about the labor markets, have impact on capital allocation, productivity, and just overall long-range business strategy. So, his viewpoint, really, when you look at it, he really did say two parts of the coin. One, certainly he's being optimistic and where AI could unlock that productivity and have an impact in terms of a boom that, changes the way that we just fundamentally work today, which is great. But part two is certainly cautionary. It's, if that transition to using AI becomes too abrupt, or where those institutions aren't prepared, and more importantly, where their employees aren't prepared, then that will actually obviously not be good. So, I look at this the way, for you as listeners, it's just, this is not just a futuristic soundbite. What's important here is that it's a mix of optimism layered in with a warning. So basically, it's essentially saying that AI may eventually make this world better and lighter, but if and only if businesses and governments can manage to make that transition well enough and meaningful enough to keep workers and not get them left behind. So again, there's certainly an element of truth, and I think it goes back to the fact that this is coming from somebody like Jamie Dimon. So totally changing the subject. Next, we're going to get into a little bit as it relates to OpenAI and their ad. So I don't know if for those that had watched the Super Bowl, and again, the Super Bowl is worldwide, that there were a couple of funny, if not interesting, ads by Anthropic, kind of jabbing at OpenAI and their plan to put in advertisements into ChatGPT. And again, this is the for those that don't pay, or at least are not at the $20 a month or above, people are getting ads. So, there was certainly some questions on how this would be perceived. Are users going to be interested? What are the advertisers that would, quote unquote, show up to be able to, run ads on the platform? Well, OpenAI just basically hit a first tier milestone where they have $100 million in annual recovering revenue just after 2 months of the rollout. So this clearly puts them ahead of the game. I think anybody wouldn't have thought it would have been this quick, but this allows them to really look at what's possible out of that free and the go tiers of ChatGPT. So some of the stats on this: 600 advertisers already participating. There's no at least measurable drops in the user trust, so those folks that are doing it, as well as the privacy metrics. Since this has gone so well, OpenAI is already looking at expanding the users. So there's already a testing underway in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And there's a couple of things that I found was interesting on this, is that the ads do exclude sensitive topics, and it makes sense. Things like no ads on politics, no ads specifically targeted around health or mental health for that matter. And they also put some guardrails and safety systems around that. So users under 18 do not see any of these ads. And again, I'm sure that would cause a firestorm, certainly some legalities against OpenAI if they did that. So the other thing too is that not everybody is seeing these ads. There's only about 20%, at least what's been reported, of eligible users out of that pool that are actually seeing ads, despite an overwhelming majority of people that are eligible, quote unquote, that are able to see these ads. Now, that does have some downside. There's been some rumblings that the advertisers who are working with OpenAI, they're kind of a little bit frustrated on the slow, conservative rollout. But OpenAI has, come out and said that, the pace is intentional. It's about learning first, not to make any of those mistakes, and then scaling later. So now let's take that step back, because I always like to talk about like what does this mean for us, whether or not you're an executive at the business level or the technical side. So, first off is that this is certainly a massive revenue stream for OpenAI, more than just, selling tokens, to access a model or a paid subscription for ChatGPT. This is real new revenue. And again, crossing that $100 million annual revenue rate, or ARR, it's a strong signal that, the consumers can be monetized in a scale that I don't think anyone thought would have been able to be approached. And more importantly, it seems like it's sustainable. So Yeah, that's a major opportunity for OpenAI. The other one is that this shifts a business model. So these ads inside of these AI assistants, in this case, it's ChatGPT, it really represents a new category of intent-rich, context-aware advertising. And this certainly could reshape the landscape for these digital ad markets, which are obviously dominated today by Google and Meta. So again, obviously a potential shakeup in that regard. The other thing too is that enterprise AI strategy should and must, I would say, account for these monetized assistants. So if these assistants become ad supported at scale, companies need to consider how their brand appears in AI generated content. They need to consider how do their employees interact with AI influenced tools, and they need to determine whether or not they adopt a paid or ad free enterprise based tiers. Obviously, though, there's competitive pressure out there and it's rising. As I mentioned before, Anthropic did publicly ridicule, how this, shapes the strategic thinking, at least with OpenAI. But, this is, I would say, expect more aggressive differentiation across the major labs because right now OpenAI is the only one that's doing that. But I guarantee you they're going to be looking at the effectiveness long term for what this means. From a technical perspective, there's a couple things obviously we need to think about. One is, the ads that are inside the LLM, the interfaces, does that introduce new user experiences and safety constraints that we as developers need to kind of adhere to? The other thing too is that this signals a shift towards this multimodal context-aware ad delivery. So all the things that we think about in terms of conversational context, those could require then new pipelines in the things that we build for ads, everything from retrieval, ranking or re-ranking, safety filtering, and the things that we do for real-time insertion in times of ads. So this could obviously open up as a new frontier in AI-driven delivery systems and content. It goes without saying, this obviously could also open up a lot more as it relates to infrastructure. So this is additional scaling because now maybe you've got more advertisers, you've got more content going through. So what does this mean for high throughput ad serving, fine grained eligibility logic that needs to be built, as well as like regional compliance layers? Because what can be shown in one market may not be able to be delivered in another. So, those are just some things that we as technical folks, as we may be developing these ads or the platforms that will be running it, especially if you're OpenAI, but others as well, it has an impact. All right, on to another one. I kind of did mention this as I went through the Jamie Dimon opener or quote of the week, if you will. This one actually comes from Anthropic. So it seems like there's always things in the news that talks about how AI is impacting the workforce, and this is no different. So we have a report from Anthropic, and this one suggests while AI has not yet created or caused widespread job losses, there's already evidence of how it's reshaping the workforce and who gets ahead, at work. So according to the Anthropic's head of economics, Peter McCrory, unemployment rates haven't meaningfully diverged from workers who are heavily using AI tools like Claude or OpenAI, from those that are less AI exposed in terms of roles, at least for now. And I think that's the important caveat, at least for now. And the reason why I say that is underneath, the surface stability that is depicted in this report, there is a deeper shift underway. So the report does find a growing skills gap between these early adopters and these newer users, let alone the fact that, for folks that are not even looking at AI, they're certainly even further back. But those power users, those who integrate AI deeply into their workflows, whether or not they're extracting, more value using models, not just for quote unquote quick search tasks, but more as thought partners in iteration, feedback, problem solving. that's the person who's really further ahead. So the what's in this report is that the advantage is not evenly distributed. So AI usage is more intense in high income countries and regions that have dense knowledge worker populations. So this certainly then raises the concern that AI could amplify existing economic inequalities rather than leveling the playing field. So again, the placement, the displacement hasn't actually hit yet, but Anthropic's leadership, and again throughout this report, cautions it could arrive quickly. So their CEO Dario Amade has publicly suggested that AI could eliminate a large share of entry level white collar jobs within 5 years, making early monitoring and policy planning super critical. So this sort of this dichotomy I talked about it before, where Jamie Dimon in his quote is saying like, "Hey, we could have a short work week because everything looks rosy with AI," but he did hint about like the too far, too fast. This is the same kind of concept that's being shown in an actual report based upon Anthropic's analysis. So, the things, again, I take this back. Why is this going to be important for business folks? Think about the AI advantage. It compounds early. Teams that learn and use AI deeply, not just casually, they're going to be the ones that are already pulling ahead. And if you're waiting to see how this plays out, you have the risk of falling behind faster moving companies. I could talk about it at the company level. You could think about it at the personal level. So the other thing too, from a business strategy point of view, is that your talent needs a reset. So the biggest risk is not about layoffs. It's about uneven productivity gains. So leaders need to invest in AI fluency across an organization, not just those tools. Again, you really want to put, these tools in the hands of your knowledge workers to make them more proficient. And if you're not making that investment, or if you even are making that investment in the tools, what are you doing to enable those users with those tools? There's obviously inequality as a business risk here as well. And then, policy and workforce planning, that can't wait. So even if the displacement has not arrived yet, we have a window to prepare, to think about that reskilling and role redesign now. From a technical perspective, AI skill depth matters. I mean, you're listening to this podcast, so obviously you want to get ahead of the game. So it's simply having the AI tools at your fingertips is not enough. However, I would say that your biggest advantage is going to be through usage. Go through that prompt iteration, feedback loops, treating the models as collaborators, and trying to think about how you do your daily job differently by leveraging those. Obviously, that means also that early adopters are building like these durable advantages that are going to make you more valuable in the work system, and it's going to be able to leverage the gains that you had. So there's I could go on and on the different things. I would say it's about monitoring the things that we're going to be able to monitor how your use of AI is going to affect your role today, and I think that's the biggest thing that will defend against this potential disruption tomorrow is, are you understanding the things that you're able to be productive at, and can you talk to them? Do you have the metrics that can back that up? And again, I say that's at a personal level and at a company level as well. Okay, totally shifting gears. Let's talk about Sora. Again, this hit the news airwaves about a week and a half ago. This is being recorded on April 4th. But what are the real reasons why OpenAI shut down Sora? And it was certainly sudden. It's high profile video generation tool. There were certainly different things that plagued Sora. I mean, there were privacy concerns. There were other concerns around rollout, how they fared against competitors. I mean, there's strong players in this space. Google with their with VO. There's open source models. I mean, there's a lot that are out there that are doing this. But OpenAI had a huge surge when Sora, the app. Again, there's the Sora, the actual video model, but then there's Sora, the consumer app, which was meant to be I'm going to call it a doom scroller, right? Just looking at all the different videos that people had created. That initial rollout or initial uptick by users was like skyrocketing. They had, it peaked around 1 million. After the initial surge, it peaked around 1 million downloads users of that, but it dropped below 500,000. Meanwhile, and I think this is the bigger tell here, the Sora product itself was burning through more than $1 million per day in compute costs. So when you look at the realm of inferencing and being able to use AI models, there's obviously a cost. There's GPUs that are running these things. And if you're just doing like token generation, there's a cost there. We know that by the amount of money that we pay for inferencing. If you're using any one of these tools, there's that same compute cost for video generation models. So, and it's a lot more to generate output from video than it is to generate text. So that's where the $1 million burn per day. So when you look at a company like OpenAI, they had their fingers in doing like Sora. They had other projects that were going on. I'll talk about one of them. They talked about changing the way that ChatGPT or the GPT models deals with adult content. Well, that's another offshoot, right? So the bottom line, they had all these different distractions. Like, how do they focus on their core business? So their video tool was not their core business. You think about the pressures that OpenAI gets today. What's their major competition? Yes, it's certainly Google. It's certainly to some extent XAI and Meta. It's the open source, like whether it's DeepSeek, right? But their main competitor is Anthropic, and Anthropic, I would say, has been kicking OpenAI's butt, if you will, in winning over the developers and enterprise customers, especially on like the models like Opus 4.6, right? But they've been shipping some really great and innovative tools, things like Claude Code and Claude Cowork. So that's a long-term revenue and long-term platform lock-in that's happening. And OpenAI had started to see their dominance in the enterprise start to get chipped away from the likes of these Anthropic models and work. So the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, ultimately made the call to shut down Sora and free up their compute and and free up basically their people to refocus on OpenAI's resources to drive higher impact products. And obviously this was abrupt. And there was news back in, what was it, December, January, and somewhere around there, where Disney was a major partner of OpenAI. And, they had a partnership of $1 billion to work with OpenAI to, have a partnership that was going to deliver IP within Sora models. So, that even became a surprise to Disney, just that, boom, their relationship, or at least that deal, was literally cut overnight. And in short, I would say, the shutdown wasn't because it was dangerous or controversial. It was really all about the grow too fast, too quick, and put too many elements that weren't aligned with the strategic viewpoint of where OpenAI needs to go in the future. So again, I take this back that there's lessons learned here. It's about how do we think about compute in a core element of our business that could be a constraint. So it's not just about innovation. It's about allocating the right scarce and expensive infrastructure resources to the products that could drive the revenue and drive the competitive advantage that OpenAI really needed. And again, this is true for any company. The other thing too is that flashy demos and tools don't actually equal to sustainable business outcome. As I said before, you had 1 million people actually using the Sora, Sora app to generate these videos and put it out there more on like the social app. but that doesn't mean that's actually driving business. You know, enterprise and developer wins the AI race, at least today. It's the tools that can embed workflows, things like the coding assistants that are actually proving to be far more defensible than just consumer novelty apps, aka Sora. And you know, there's partnership risk, obviously, in fast-moving AI organizations, and that was certainly evident with the Disney partnership here that kind of obviously fizzled or got abruptly pulled overnight just based upon this decision. You know, from a technical perspective, you know, always think about compute. I think that's what it comes down to. It's expensive. Compute allocation, you know, is a product decision that should be made as well. It's like where are your engineers going to be focused on what they're able to do, and it's about, you know, what do we have capable that's going to be modeled for our users, but then also, you know, what do we realistically have as it relates to core spend on this infrastructure. To me, it comes back to like the developer. Yes, that was a play at at a Microsoft conference many years ago, but it's about the developers. You know, Claude Code has been seeing real success, and it shows how productivity-focused AI tools are really where it's driving adoption, these feedback loops, and then that's also where revenue converges. And I think that's an important lesson, you know, out of all this. And the other thing too is that model capability does not equal product viability. So even, you know, technically impressive systems can be shut down if they don't align with usage patterns, infrastructure limits, and most importantly, the business priorities that are out there. Okay, so let's get to a couple of rapid news items in this. So Google actually came out with a couple of quick worthy news items this week. So Gemma 4, this is the latest update to its open weight AI models. And obviously this is a big one for developers. I think I mentioned in one of our past episodes, I do run Lite LLM, and I have many different open source models that I run locally. So I'll definitely be giving this one a try out. But this one includes 4 different models in Gemma 4 that are optimized for everything from like smartphones to high-end GPUs. And it's obviously boasting gains in terms of speed, reasoning, and code generation. The headline here is that Google is switching Gemma to the Apache 2 license model. So it's ditching its more restrictive custom terms. So I think this is actually going to make Gemma far more attractive for commercial and open source use, especially for teams building local or offline AI systems, kind of like what I just mentioned. The other thing from Google is VO 3.1 Lite. It's a new low-cost AI video generation model. Go back to what I just said about Sora, right? It's a low-cost video generation model aimed squarely at developers building, you know, high-volume apps. So it delivers the same speed as VO 3.1, but it does it at less than half of the cost. And it's supporting text to video and image to video in both portrait and landscape modes up to 1080p. So this model is now live on the Gemini API, and there's supposedly additional price cuts coming soon, signaling Google's push to make AI video generation far more accessible at scale. So again, totally different viewpoints from Google and OpenAI. The other last thing from Google on this quick news is that they just introduced some new hardware capabilities. So it's unveiled what they call TurboQuant. It's a new compression technique that could cut the memory needed to run large language models up by 6 times. So again, if you don't know anything about the hardware and infrastructure, you need a lot of memory. As an example, like I have my small little rig here and I've got 16 gigs of GPU memory. I run out of that super quick. So if I could run larger models on my GPUs, and again, I'm small scale, think about those larger like the NVIDIA enterprise scale cards, right, or GPUs. If I'm able to fit more into that space, then I'm able to run larger models on that. So that did cause a little bit of scare in the memory chip stocks. Everything with Samsung, Micron, they all slid on the fears that, oh my God, what does this actually mean? Does this mean that we're going to sell fewer chips because you're going to be able to run more on those? I would say, and analysts are saying the same thing, that those fears are probably likely short term, and it's probably more about profit taking. And I see this as this could actually spur on more efficient models that can actually drive longer term demand for more of this advanced AI hardware. So, it depends on, do you look at this glass half full or glass half empty? All right. So, next thing in the rapid news, Chat GPT just landed in your car. And I could say this is true because I have a car that has Apple CarPlay. And indeed, I did see and I did try Chat GPT. So, this is not where you're going to be typing in things into Chat GPT, but it is a dedicated Chat GPT app in Apple CarPlay. You do need to be at iOS 2.6.4, sorry, 26.4 to support this, and it's all voice-based apps, so it's not like you're typing into your car. But again, as I just said, this CarPlay version is fully voice-driven, no text, no visuals. It's just designed for this hands-free use while driving. But it's certainly cool, in my opinion, because like I said, I've tried it out. This certainly marks the first major AI assistant to get native CarPlay integration, and it's signaling, a convergence on AI or conversation and AI starting to be more directly integrated into your car experience, dashboard, whatever you want to say. So I like this one. We'll see where it goes. I like it because there's certainly things that I think about, and if I'm driving behind the wheel, I could brainstorm on new ideas or start my next business project just by chatting with the latest GPT model. So, last but not least, I want to talk about a new launch from Microsoft, and this is about new capabilities that are coming to their agent called Researcher. And again, Researcher has been around for a while. In AI terms, a year is a while, right? So they're upgrading Researcher to include two additional capabilities that are going to be included within their deep research agent. So this is a major shift because they're including multimodal intelligence inside of the model. So instead of just relying on a single AI model to do the planning, research, and writing, Researcher, again, that's the agent, now includes the ability to orchestrate multiple frontier models, including systems not only from OpenAI, but also Anthropic. And the intent is that this will improve accuracy, the depth, and the trust that comes out of the output from this. So the two new capabilities specifically that are called out, one is called critique. This is what separates generation from evaluation. So one model handles the planning, the retrieval, and the drafting of the content, while a second model acts as the structured reviewer, doing things like challenging the claims from the generator, reinforcing or enforcing the citations that were initially called out, as well as improving the clarity before the final report is actually delivered. So it's basically, think about it as your English teacher maybe looking over your paper and then making the corrections. It's literally what critique is doing. There's another model or agent inside of this part of this release called Counsel. I don't like the name, by the way, but let's run with it, right? Counsel is a multiple model. So think of it this way: you've got OpenAI running the initial generation, but then you have another in parallel. And again, this is the Anthropic model. It's presenting a side-by-side report and ultimately a synthesized summary between those that highlights where the models agree, where they diverge, and also it's giving it's contributing unique insights between the two. So the council, again, like I said, I don't really like the name of council, but it's basically, hey, let me run these two in parallel, let me compare, and ultimately give you the best output from that comparison. So there's a key takeaway here is that obviously Microsoft is treating its AI Researcher less as a chatbot and more of a peer review workflow. And again, this is bringing academic style validation into everyday knowledge work. Again, I come back to why is this important? Higher trust in the output of this It's going to have enterprise grade reliability because the architecture now mirrors how organizations really work between draft, review, refine, and then making the output better. And that can be used to be more defensible in like highly regulated or high stakes environments. Again, because it's doing more of that repetitive comparison, analysis, and critique of the output. The other thing too is that it's treat this now as a strategic analyst. It's not just a helper. These are things that really can help evolve the productivity tools inside of a decision support system. From a technical perspective, this is the separation and concerns of different AI systems. So you think about generation and evaluation as being handled through different models. This is going to provide a stronger feedback loop and hopefully measurable quality gains in the output. You've got a rubric-based, judge-driven evaluation. So the critique actually applies structured review criteria that aligns with the accuracy, completion, and the grounding, similar to academic peer reviews. And again, these are things that we could think about. How do we weave into any of the applications that we're building? This should not just be a notion for Microsoft and its researcher agent, but these are things that are patterns that should be within the apps that we build. So anyway, the big picture takeaway is that this is not just a feature update that Microsoft put out there. This is really a signal on how the future of AI or applied AI could be multimodal, could be elements that provide this evaluative and system design approach. So anyway, that's this week's episode. Hopefully you got some value at least out of one or two of these stories, and we will be back next week. Once again, thanks everybody, and see you next episode.